Well, Patrice, we talk a lot to clients about what they're going to do in retirement, and they all express different dreams, different goals, maybe values that they have that they want to build upon, whether it's involvement in the community or we have clients that will travel abroad and build houses for less fortunate. Whatever your goals and dreams are, and travel is one of the most common that we hear about, we encourage people to not wait. Start early, do dry runs, and do what I call mini retirements. So there's a book out there, I think it's called The 4-Day Work Week, but they talk about mini retirements to the extreme. So what is a mini retirement? So you define it yourself, but for me, I try to every 2 years take about a 4 to 5 week trip somewhere to travel and really have a vacation. And there's something about having that extended time that really allows you to relax. Now, my family laughs at me because when I relax, I come up with a new entrepreneurial venture or business idea or something that I'm going to change and improve my client's journey. But your mind is at ease, and it's amazing what happens when you do that. But if you're truly just retiring, you just enjoy the journey. So we want to talk a little bit about that today. And my guest today is my brother, Ed Wheeler, who lives in Tennessee. And he is an individual that has taken this well beyond what I've done. I think in the last 3 years, he's spent time in Tbilisi, Georgia, Salema, Malta. I should put my glasses on. Is that Karlovy or Karlovy, Czech? And Prague, of course, Prague again, Barcelona, Lisbon. This is all just in the last 3 years. And I kind of joke with him where he says, well, when I retire, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And my response is usually, what do you mean when you retire? You are retired. So he's a consultant. So he has a unique set of timelines where he'll be on and off jobs. But let me just introduce you to Ed, and Ed, tell him a little bit about your thinking and how you view these trips that you take.
All right. Well, my name's Ed Wheeler. I live just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm an engineering consultant. I think one of the things in Terry's introduction that I keyed on was at the very beginning when he said, don't wait. My situation is, I guess, a little bit unique, but I wish it were not. My father-in-law passed away within 1 year after he retired, when he was 57 years old. And my wife is a 2-time cancer survivor. And when things like that happen, it kind of changes your perspective, and it changed her perspective. So we figured out not long ago that we're getting older. I'm 58 years old.
Yeah, he's the older brother, everybody.
You just, you can't wait. Tomorrow's not promised, right? So as Terry said, I've spent basically 3 months a year in Europe for each of the last 3 years. My first trip was to Tbilisi, Georgia. I actually went out there. It was my first big trip, and I didn't know what people might think about me going off by myself to Tbilisi. My wife had no interest in going to Tbilisi. So I actually went on my birthday, because I'm like, nobody's going to give me a hard time if I travel to Tbilisi, Georgia on my birthday.
I think Mom still did.
I did. I left on my birthday, which was January 24th. I had an Airbnb for 6 days. And in those 6 days, I had to find an apartment or a place to stay for the next 2 months. So I ended up befriending the guy who rented me my Airbnb. He found me an apartment in Tbilisi, Georgia, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment in the nicest part of the city, basically, for $500 a month.
Now, Eddie, why did you choose? There aren't too many people that would go to Tbilisi, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking about Georgia, meaning the state of Georgia. We're talking about the country, Georgia.
Just south of Russia, yeah.
So what made you choose that, and how did you find that destination? Why did you go there?
There's a YouTube guy, the Nomad Capitalist, and he has a saying. He's like, go where you're treated best. And he's been all over the world in 70 countries or whatever. And he makes his home in two places. Basically, he goes back and forth between Tbilisi, Georgia, and Malaysia. And so I had done a bunch of research and had done on Tbilisi, Georgia. And I actually went there looking at commercial real estate. So I went there looking at restaurants, different commercial buildings. At one point, I went and looked at it. It was a big brick building, but it turned out to be an old schoolhouse. But yeah, so I went there looking at for investment opportunities because there were a lot of really cool things going on in the country. Basically, the whole country had been revamped. It was one of the safest countries in the world. It was a real young democracy that was really kind of taken off. And so it just really interested me, and to the point to where I had to go see it for myself. So that was the first big trip. And I went there, like I said, on January 24th, got an apartment for 2 months for February and March. And then towards the end of March, funny story, on my way to Tbilisi, Georgia, I was at JFK International Airport and I was hanging out. I had a layover and I was hanging out with this kid from Germany. And we were talking about traveling and all his travels. He'd been all over Europe. And he told me in that layover that his favorite place that he'd ever been was Malta. So literally on the way to Tbilisi, Georgia, he tells me about Malta. So I tacked on a couple weeks on my way home from Tbilisi, Georgia, because I got a one-way ticket to Tbilisi because I didn't know how long I was going to stay or when I was going to come back. I tacked on a couple weeks in Malta. So I called my wife and I'm like, my wife's name is Cindy. I'm like, are you interested? Do you want to meet me in Malta for a couple weeks? She's like, hell yeah, I want to go to Malta. So I flew from Tbilisi, Georgia to Malta. She flew from Tennessee to Malta. And I was there for 14 days. She was there for 10 days. And then, we just tacked a couple weeks in Malta on the way back, just because I met that kid in JFK Airport.
So for the listeners, Eddie's niece, which is my oldest daughter, she is 50% Maltese. So we actually have family history that goes back there too. But a question for you on this. So for the listeners, we're going to talk a lot about budget travel. You can travel at all different levels, but Eddie likes to get a lot of value out of his travel, and he travels cheaper, admittedly, than my wife and I do, for sure. But I want to ask you a question. The 2 months roughly that you spent in Georgia, which was more expensive, that 2 months or the 2 weeks in Malta?
That's a good question. Probably the 2 months, because, like the food, they have incredible food in Georgia, in Tbilisi. And it is very inexpensive, but eating out every day for 2 months
does
adds
add
up
up
more than 2 weeks in Malta.
Yeah. But how much would you say you spent, or did you keep track? Do you know what you spent for that 2 months in Georgia?
Yeah, I was probably, I think it was around $6,000.
For 2 months
in
Georgia.
In Georgia.
Did that include your flights and everything?
I believe that included my flight.
Okay. So that's very affordable for people traveling 2 months.
Yeah, the other thing, you know how we said initially, don't wait? Interesting story is I was actually in Tbilisi, Georgia when Russia invaded the Ukraine. So there are all kinds of protests going on. My family was freaking out, saying, "Are you coming home?" I'm like, "No, I'm staying."
Was there any fear that they were going to do anything with Georgia?
Honestly, no, not so much. I was more, at the time, I thought that Russia was going to invade the Ukraine and the war would last about 6 days. I didn't think that the Ukraine could last against Russia. Most people didn't at the time. And really my thought was weird because in Georgia, the demographic, the people were predominantly young, like under 25, under 30. There's a lot of young people there. And so when everybody was like freaking out, like, "Are you going to come home? It's not safe," or what have you, my thought was, don't worry about me. I'm like what, 55 years old at the time. I'm 55. I'm worried about all these young people. Like if they got invaded by Russia, my concern would be for, this whole city that was filled with all these young people, not necessarily for myself. My mom's like, well, we don't care about those young people. We want you to get on a plane and come home. But that's not how I was thinking.
So what was your favorite thing about Georgia?
The food and basically Georgia had been conquered by several countries. So there were all different parts of the city that were very different. And they had a subway system that was easy to use. And you would get out of one subway station, and it was like you were in a completely different country than a different stop on the same station. So you get out in one part of the city and it's all block housing like former Soviet Union. You get out in another part of the city and there's like a Turkish part of the city that was all from when Turkey basically ruled Georgia. Another part was very Western European with cobble road streets and the cool architecture, the medieval architecture, just totally different. It was like such a mesh, such a blend of different cultures all in the same city, which was really, really cool.
So would you recommend somebody listening to this?
Oh, well, you know what I started to say is when I said don't wait is because I was there when Russia invaded the Ukraine. Since I left, over 1 million Russians have immigrated to Tbilisi or to Georgia. Tbilisi.
Russians or Ukrainians?
Russians.
Really?
Russians. Because what happened is Russians were even showing up while I was there because Russians that were traveling outside of Russia were afraid to go back into Russia because they didn't think Putin would let them leave again. And then you have also a bunch of people that were fleeing Russia to avoid the draft and they didn't believe in the war. And so they were trying to get out of Russia and stay out of Russia.
Wow. What an interesting time.
So because all these Russians moved to Tbilisi, all the prices have gone up. I've talked to people who have gone back since I was there and everything was like a third more expensive, 30% more expensive. And just a lot more Russians than when I was there.
Okay, so what about Malta and some of your other trips? So how was Malta different, and what did you like about that experience?
Malta was much more first world, much more touristy. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. It's all like I liked visiting there. The seafood was great. I like seafood, so I ate a lot of seafood while I was there. But they have these giant castle walls. There's like all these fortress walls, and they're all kind of the same color, which kind of messed with me. Like a lot of times you go places you have a lot of different textures, different colors. A lot of this, it was all the same color. And then I kind of, to be honest with you, I called it's kind of like a prison city. It's like, are the walls there to keep people out or are the walls there to keep people in? Really, they're there to keep people out because they had been invaded so many times by so many other countries. And so it was a fortress. But, your mind, you're like, okay, but it's just like a fortress city. It's really, really cool to see, a lot of good pictures. And there's some really cool things about it, but I couldn't stay there for months at a time, I don't think.
Gotcha. And then in 2023, you went to the Czech Republic and you started out, I guess, in Karlovy. Am I pronouncing that right?
Karlovy Vary.
So what was that? What was that like? And why did you go to that part of Czech Republic?
I went to Karlovy Vary because basically just doing research online where they said, the 4 cities that you have to go if you go to the Czech Republic, Karlovy Vary was one of them. It's a spa town. Honestly, Karlovy Vary was not so much my style, but my wife loved it.
Spa town?
And your wife would love it. It's all like fancy shops and, dress stores. And it's just very high end, fancy spa town. And
how affordable was it there?
It was pretty affordable, I think.
Meaning Prague is so touristy and such an amazing place that we'll talk about in a moment, but it's more expensive because there's so many tourists there. Whereas this is a lesser known town. Is it the same where it's tourist run or no?
what was it? One of the James Bond films was filmed in Karlovy Vary. In fact, we were staying right across from the casino where the James Bond film was filmed.
Yeah, I think I remember that scene.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was really cool. We were there I was there for 2 weeks. Cindy came in for 1 week. So she spent a week in Karlovy Vary, or maybe 4 days in Karlovy Vary, and then the rest of her time in Prague. But it was just cool. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
And this trip was, it looks like from my notes, May 20th to August 2nd for you. So June, July, about a little over 2 months.
Yep. 2.5 months, basically. Basically, as an American, you can spend up to 90 days in Europe, visa free. So I'm usually
Is
going
that
for
all?
like 2.5 months.
You're only allowed 90 days?
90 days, yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I've never had a 90-day vacation yet, but one of these days that information will come in handy. And then you spent a good chunk of it. It looks like June 1st, August 2nd, you were in Prague.
Prague, that was my bucket list trip, which that goes back, Terry, once upon a time, I wanted to live and work from Prague. And I was very close to making that happen. But then it all fell apart at the end, basically. So Prague has always been on my radar. Prague is it is so far my favorite city in the world. And I just love Prague. So that was a big bucket list trip for me.
It's a beautiful city.
When I travel, part of my thing is when I travel, I don't travel like a tourist so much. I want to get the feel like I'm living there. So really, I would prefer to rent an apartment for months at a time, settle in, and just I want to know what it feels like to live in Europe. Not necessarily be bouncing around to all the tourist attractions.
Yeah, what part of Prague did you stay in?
Well, there's Praha. There's different sections. So I was in Praha 7 and Praha 10, which neither one are like the city center where all the tourists are. You're right. Prague is one of the 5 most visited cities in all of Europe. It's very touristy, but there's a particular part of Prague where all the tourists go. So you can dip into that part, because I'm a big people watcher too. I like to people watch. So if I feel like going to where all the tourists are and people watching, I'll do that. But then the public transportation in Prague is second to none. So you can basically get all over the city, all over different parts of the city that most tourists will never see, just using their public transportation. And that's also great, because at this point, no matter where I stay in Prague, I always know I can get around the city because the public transportation is so good.
So what is 7 and 10 like? How does that differ from like Charles Bridge in the downtown touristy area?
7, I think, is a little bit more industrial, although where I was staying was right across the street from a grocery store and a business complex that had a bunch of businesses in it. And there were restaurants on the bottom level for all the people that worked there. So there were a lot of restaurants around, and also a grocery store immediately across the street. And then I go up like 2 blocks and jump on the tram, and I can be anywhere in the city that I want to go.
Gotcha.
Now,
Okay.
10 was kind of cool. It was kind of like reminded me of New York a little bit, in that you have neighborhood restaurants and neighborhood groceries. They're very, very much like a little neighborhood feel, your little neighborhood park. Yeah, everybody knows everybody in that area. And of course, I stick out a little bit because that area where I was staying, there's not a lot of tourists. So, they know, they know you're a tourist. You come in, you don't speak Czech, and they just kind of like welcome you into their little neighborhood, and you dip in and dip out because you're basically visiting the whole city.
And now in 2024, you went back to Prague. It looks like from August 7th to August 25th, and then moved on to Spain from the 25th of August to 25th of September, and then Lisbon from the 25th of September to October 23rd. So clearly you liked Prague because you went back again and added that to your trip.
Yeah, anytime I go, in fact, we'll talk about that in a minute, but so as far as Barcelona, for Spain and Portugal, that's my wife's bucket list trip, which kind of became mine, because my wife's grandmother is full-blooded Portuguese. Her mother's half Portuguese, and my wife is quarter Portuguese. So she's always wanted to go to Portugal for as long as I've known her. And so we've always talked about going to Spain and Portugal. big bucket list trip. Total Western European countries, way more expensive than what I generally like to spend. I really prefer the Eastern European countries. I like getting a good thing for my buck. But Barcelona was incredible.
Yes, it was. I got to actually join him there.
A lot of people, when I talked before I went, they kind of talked down Barcelona and they talked up Lisbon, Portugal. So
Yeah.
but then when I got to Barcelona, first couple days were a little rough. But once I was able to get out of the most touristy area, the old kind of sketchy area, and go to other parts of the city, I came to love the city really quick. Incredible beach scene. The beach there is amazing. And the other thing that was awesome for me is Terry came out. I was in Barcelona for 1 month. So I was there about a week by myself. Then my brother, Terry, came out.
That's me.
For 10 days. So I got 10 days, just me and my brother in Barcelona. And that was really awesome and really special because my brother, he's got a big family. He's got a law firm. He's very, very busy. It's really hard to get 1 or 2 days with Terry. So to get 10 days in a row in Barcelona with Terry was like we were kids again. Just running around, exploring, doing whatever we want. I remember when he first showed up and he goes, so what are we going to do? What are we going to, like everything's got to be planned. I go, we can do whatever we want to do. I go, we can do whatever we want to do. We don't have to do anything if we want. We can go eat. We can go to the beach. We can do, we have no plans. We can do whatever we want. And Terry looks at me, he goes, really? He's like, we can do that? I'm like, yeah, we can do that.
So there's a little difference in how I've traveled. So we've taken these mini vacations too, but to give you an idea of how our family travels, I run the wealth planning business, a law firm, and we are fortunate that about every 2 years I've got enough miles saved up where I can fly my entire giant family over to Europe or to Hawaii, and we like Europe. So you go to Europe and we've got 5 kids, and usually my sister-in-law comes with us. So there's 8 of us typically on these trips. So when we go over there, I will rent a van. So we'll maybe fly into Paris as an example, spend some time there, and then I'll rent a van and we'll drive all through France, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Spain. Everything has to be planned out because you have 8 people. So to get arrangements, it's a whole different way of travel. We're on the go constantly. And my wife, Angela, is great at setting everything up. And it's a tremendous amount of work for her. So these trips are not pure fun for her because she's like the tour guide trying to make sure everybody is where they need to be at the right time. But they are tremendous family memories, and we see just amazing things. And we do it on a budget, but not the same kind of budget as Ed, because with 8 people, it's expensive no matter what we do. But it's a very different trip. So when I arrived in Spain, I had already been there. I mean, we had brought our family there, so I didn't really need to do all the tourist things. I wanted to hang out with him. But it definitely is very different where when he's saying we can do whatever we want, we have nothing to do, he's not joking. He has, I mean, he doesn't even plan the next day, let alone the day that or the day after that. So you're getting up and you're like, well, should we go to the beach today? Should we go check this out? Should we go check that out? And it was a blast just hanging out with you. And I'm in California, you're in Tennessee. So the time we do get together, our families are typically together, but just to be the 2 of us hanging out was an amazing experience that I will cherish and I will pay for years to come, meaning me going without Angela for 10 days with you in Spain. I will continue hearing about it for a long time, but it was worth it for sure.
No, it was super, super cool. I hope we get a chance to do something like that again at some point in the future.
Yeah, just convince Angela I'm game. That was a blast.
Yeah, I'm not sure I haven't figured that out yet. That's the hard part.
She told me the other day, she goes, well, I'm going to go. So our oldest daughter together is going to college, as you know, Peyton. So she's going over her school schedules. She's like, well, Peyton will have 2 months off here. Her and I can go to Australia and New Zealand during this time. I'm like, what do you mean you and her? What about me? Well, somebody's got to take care of the kids, and you had your trip. I'm going to go. So
yeah, with Angela, she's just going to make you pay.
yeah, she's plotting her revenge.
Yeah. Well, Cindy's learning too. Like, at first, there's all these countries she wasn't interested in going to. Now she's like, well, maybe I am interested. I just didn't know it. Like, I was doing research on Albania, which is a big trip that I want to do. And Cindy saw all the YouTube videos and stuff on Albania. She's like, that looks really nice. I want to go to Albania.
Yeah, she's wise enough.
A few years ago, she would have never even considered going to Albania.
And I think getting outside your comfort zone and traveling to some of these places, it seems like it's become contagious for you. Like you're more comfortable doing it now. And it's the same for everybody. I mean, doing the first time we did this massive trip to Europe, Angela didn't want to do it. I had to twist her arm and say, look, this is both of our lives. I want to travel Europe. And she loved it. And now she's all for, let's do trips. Let's go different places. And it's work. Like travel can be work, but it's so worth it.
Well, it's also interesting in like I said, I've spent 3 months a year each of the last 3 years in Europe. And we just got back end of October last year. And I wasn't really ready to go back, but I still had that itch. Like I started looking at websites and looking at YouTube videos and wherever I might go on my next trip. So part of me was feeling like, I don't know that I'm ready. But what I'm starting to feel like is when you go to countries that you've never been to before, like when we went to Spain and Portugal, it takes a lot more energy than if you go someplace that you're already familiar with and you like. So for instance, I'm like, yeah, if I go to Albania, and if you go to Albania, you can take a ferry over to Italy from Albania. You can also take a different ferry over to Corfu, one of the Greek islands. But it's all new and it's going to take a certain amount of energy. Whereas if I just went back to Prague for even a month, I get there, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly, I know the airport. I know how to get my transit thing, like right at the airport. I know how to get around the city. It's just less work. It takes less energy. So I thought, well, maybe I would want to go back to Prague for a little while. Or do you go to someplace you've never been before, which would be great also, but would just take more energy?
Lisbon, Portugal. So this one, I think you have a little bit of a story as to where you stayed and maybe some words of caution for people. Yeah. So tell people about that.
Okay. Typically I've been using Airbnb. And a lot of times, like when I went to Tbilisi, Georgia, I was by myself. And when I went to Prague, I was by myself for most of the time. My wife was there part of the time. My son came out at the end of the trip for part of the time. But when you're by yourself, you just don't need that much. I mean, honestly, I don't need a lot. I need the two things that I look for is I want a comfortable bed and a hot shower. Okay, I don't want a lukewarm shower. I want a comfortable bed to sleep in and a hot shower. But those are the two most important things. Everything else I can pretty much, figure out and work with. So when we went to Lisbon, that was, like I said, my wife's bucket list trip. So we're on Airbnb. We're looking at different Airbnbs. There was one that I really liked, and there was a different one that she really liked. Okay, it's her bucket list trip. I'm okay. It wasn't as good for me, but I'll go with the one she wants. So we booked this Airbnb that she chose. And it was a nice looking house. It looked kind of pretty new, newer or refurbished or whatever. It was big. It was a pretty nice looking house. So we take the taxi to the Airbnb from the airport. And it's in this neighborhood that looks like something straight out of like the old part of Mexico or something. The whole neighborhood is just old and kind of a little sketchy. Okay.
Wasn't there rubble around? And
what's that?
Wasn't there rubble, like literally destroyed buildings and different things around there?
Yeah, I'll get there. So anyway, we pull up to this really old neighborhood and we're looking around. We're like, are you sure this is the right place? Because here's the picture of the house. Cindy pulled it up on her phone. She's like, this is the house. It's like, doesn't look like there's anything like that here. Well, lo and behold, there's one like new looking house right in the middle of this very old neighborhood. And so what it was is some house that they demolished and rebuilt a house on the same lot, but all around it was rubble. Across the street, there was a house with a big lemon tree growing right up through the roof and lemons everywhere. And next door, there was just rubble. Like at one point, we could look out our window and there was some guy back there like salvaging bricks, like taking bricks from the rubble and stealing them, or whether they were his, I don't know. But he was right outside our window. And it was all gated and stuff. But the people at first, it was just a little bit sketchy, but the people were nice. Like, we're in this little neighborhood, little grocery stores, little pastry places but like Angela wouldn't have liked it. Angela would not have stayed there. And Cindy didn't like it at first, but it took a little bit of we had an adjustment period. Let's put it that way.
Sure. So Google Earth would be the lesson from here. So with technology, Google Earth, you can see all around a property, but
well, that's
things really
great, except for they don't give you the actual address until right before you check in.
Oh, gotcha. You got to research your places. You can have things go wrong. So we in our trip had some places that were not what we expected, and you just got to be flexible and go with the flow a little bit. And that's part of travel. And if you can do that and not get your feathers all in a ruffle because something didn't go quite right, that's always going to happen in travel. Just embrace it. And it's part of the travel experience. But you guys, I know your personalities, you took it in stride and made the best out of the trip. And
yeah, I always say it helps a lot to lower your expectations a little bit. If you're expecting some European vacation, like on television where everything's perfect, you're probably going to be disappointed.
You can have that vacation and you won't be disappointed if you spend a lot more money. So we have clients that do like the Viking river trips I've never been on one of those, but they're supposed to be absolutely amazing. And you can travel in, first class and luxury. And that is great if you've worked and built up in a portfolio that you can afford that and you want to spend that money, then great. And some people that work up and they build that portfolio, they still want to travel more like Ed because they value their money so much and they want to pass it to the kids and that type of thing. So there are different types of travel. And what we find from a planning standpoint is everybody's idea of what is fun is different. So some of what Ed does, Angela probably would not like. Some of it I would not like, but some of it I would absolutely love. And it's just going to vary person to person as to what you want to do and how you want to travel. But I think one of the things that both Ed and I wanted to get across today is don't wait, do it. So the mini vacation, I want to work our way back to that for a moment of how people can do it. So we have a trend right now where a lot of people are able to work remote. So that's accelerating people taking trips abroad and doing things of that nature and even working abroad. So you can do a work, play, stay type thing. And I know, Ed, you have been identifying jobs because you're somewhat of a specialist in your field and you're trying to find jobs where maybe you'll be located temporarily in exciting places that are work, but also fun. So the Cayman Islands in particular is one that you had played with off and on. I know you haven't gotten that job yet. But explain kind of what you would do in that situation if you got that Cayman Island job as an example.
I've been calling myself semi-retired for the last couple of years. I feel like I've been leaning into the retirement side a little bit much, but that
would be 20 years probably.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That's what I would call it.
Hey,
when you work 6 to 9 months a year.
Yeah, but I get paid well during those 6 to 9 months.
I know. And you live in Crossville, Tennessee, where the cost of living.
Where they've offered me a certain package, say pay package or something. I'm like, well, let's see. I could work, 7 months a year for this amount of money, or 12 months a year for the same amount of money. It's like, I'll take the 7-month deal, But anyway. But you did mention Cindy did work. I worked a little bit too from Portugal. So we were working via remote access. I was working on a project in New York via remote access when I was in Spain and Portugal. Just not a lot of hours.
So everybody's going to have a different set of circumstances. You got to craft it around that. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We could probably talk for another hour on this. But ultimately, don't wait. Craft something out, get a plan, and do it. Because boy, is it, life is about memories, and travel creates so many wonderful memories. We do it with our kids, and we didn't grow up this way. Like I remember one of our biggest trips was just driving down to Disneyland one year and then seeing relatives in Kansas.
Right.
And other than that, we didn't really do much in the way of trips growing up. And our kids have had such a different world of experience, and they're so much more global citizens, so to speak, because of it. It's just amazing. So any parting words or words of advice that somebody wants to go down this path and do kind of what you're trying to do as far as researching less expensive, amazing places around the world?
I would say part of it is just know yourself. Like, what's important to you? Like, I don't have to travel the way Terry travels, and he doesn't have to travel the way I travel. The big thing for me is I say I don't mind spending money, but I don't like to waste money. I want good value for my dollar. It's important to me. If I overpay for something, it makes me miserable. I get buyer's remorse really bad. So I need to know that about myself before I go into some of these ventures. And I just know that I'm going to enjoy some of the off the beaten path, less touristy, less expensive countries. It's going to be much more enjoyable for me, because I don't want to go spend a small fortune every time I go to dinner, or every time I $50 to go see this tourist attraction. That's not me, but it is for some people. They like that. So just kind of know yourself and follow. What do they say? Follow your arrow. Do it your own way.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. We'll maybe do this again sometime. This was fun. You and I could talk for hours, like I say, but very much enjoyed having you. Stay on if you can for a moment. And thank you to the listeners. And if you want to learn more about what we do at We Alliance Wealth Advisors, please just check the show notes below, or visit us at www.wereaadvisors.com. And thank you for joining us on this little journey today. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to We Money Talk with Terry Wheeler. Be sure to click the follow button to be notified as new episodes become available. Information presented is for educational purposes only. No listener should assume that any discussions or information presented serves as the receipt of or substitute for personalized advice from We Alliance Wealth Advisors, Inc. or from any other investment professional, and is not intended as an offer of solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. We Alliance Wealth Advisors, Inc. is not a law firm or accounting firm, and no portion of this podcast should be interpreted as legal, accounting, or tax advice. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not appropriate for every individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from qualified tax, legal, or investment advisors to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation.